Such beautiful girls only come across once in a lifetime, and usually don't show any attention. But it so happened that the main character's life became filled with beauties, and he didn't even notice it. The girls were different in character and appearance, but each was attractive in her own way, and the only thing that united them was their feelings for Carl Jung, who for some reason seemed like a nice guy to everyone. The hero himself, completely by accident, ended up in that world where he met new girlfriends. When the young man first opened his eyes, he didn't even understand at first what exactly had changed in him. There were some unfamiliar people around, with intense anxiety written on their faces. Carl was sure that he died in the laboratory while saving documents important to his world. Only the absence of pain told the hero that something was wrong with his condition. As soon as Jung saw his new face, he realized how much his life would change. It turned out that the guy whose body the hero accidentally took over had recently died in a terrible car accident, and so it happened that Carl was reborn in the body of this poor guy who accidentally lost his life. The previous owner of the body did not possess any remarkable skills or abilities in life, so his life ended so insignificantly that the hero sympathized with this unknown guy. Until the very end, it seemed to Jung that he would open his eyes and find himself again in his past life. In fact, Carl no longer wanted to be a student who constantly worked for others. The question remained of how the hero was supposed to adapt to an unfamiliar world and a new family. The boy had wonderful parents, but Jung didn't know these people at all, so he felt awkward. Everything around him seemed strange and incomprehensible to the young man after he moved to another world. But what surprised Carl most was his room, which was filled with all sorts of his ex-boyfriend hobbies. His predecessor loved anime and manga so much that he filled the entire room with them. There were all sorts of figurines on the shelves of the young man who devoted himself entirely to this work, while Carl had never even held a comic book in his hands, let alone bought a figure. So Jung will have to make a lot of effort to fit into this strange world. The guy had no doubt that changes in his behavior would quickly become noticeable. Carl understood absolutely nothing about the things that were important to the previous owner. Not immediately did the hero notice another thing that was very necessary for his understanding of this world. The terrible truth was revealed to Carl when he realized that the body's owner had cosplayed many characters. This was not something Jung was prepared to do, so as not to arouse the suspicions of his parents. But the guy didn't mind starting small, because he didn't feel disgusted by reading comics. The very first cover turned out to be so out of character for Carl that he once again felt regret, but it was impossible to return to his world. So the young man had to get used to it. Many of the stories were partly familiar to Jung. Although he had not read them in his past life, it turned out that the previous owner of the body liked novels with very unexpected endings. Out of curiosity, Carl decided to read several of them to better understand his predecessor. The young man could not have imagined that this would ultimately lead him to spend the whole night reading, but the result of the preparation was so good that his mother did not suspect anything. As a good son, Carl helped his parents with their restaurant, although he knew little about the business, and the very first guests attracted the young man's attention, since he had seen them somewhere before. The girl was not shy about clinging to the boy, who looked very similar to her. Wally Simons carefully pushed away from his sister, Raleigh, who sometimes crossed the line. Their names told the hero that he had found himself in more than just another world, because in front of him were characters from a book. There was no doubt that Raleigh and Wally existed in one of the love comics, and now Carl saw these two with his own eyes, which made him completely forget about the restaurant. All this time, Jung believed that his rebirth would be simple, but everything turned out differently. At the very end of his life, the young man died in a laboratory due to a fire accident, and by chance the hero found himself in the body of a minor character in one of the popular love stories. So in order to live a long and peaceful life, Jung should not attract the attention of others. While Wally Simons looked kind, he had too many important storylines. The last thing the hero wanted in the world was to accidentally influence the development of events in the book world. For this reason, Jung completely immersed himself in the inconspicuous life of a supporting character. Thanks to his knowledge, Carl soon received good grades at school and entered university. Even there, he continued to stand out only through his studies, so as not to attract the attention of others. But all this was not enough for a man who did not want to act under the influence of the general plot. So soon, the hero did something that his predecessor had never done in his life. The guy devoted himself entirely to sports in the hope that it would radically change his destiny. Even in his past life, Carl never trained so hard because he used his brain. But suddenly, he felt a revelation in training that he quickly fell in love with to the depths of his soul. So, when the time came to enter university, the hero was completely ready for a new life. Many people constantly paid attention to Jung, but he didn't care about it. The guy tried to keep a low profile just so as not to overshadow the heroes of this story. He was lucky to meet a good friend in the form of Sam Myers, who supported all of the hero's ideas. Only this guy wasn't afraid of Carl's appearance, which had changed beyond recognition in a short period of time. Now EUNUCH was not a puny loser, but a strong and powerful brute who could do anything. Life in this world flew by unnoticed by the hero, and he soon realized that he would not return back. Carl managed to fully get used to the new routine, although he chose a difficult path for himself. Lately, he has been training constantly to prepare himself for any eventuality. Once the guy got into the world of the book, then even aliens could appear in it, and the young man did not want to lose to the aliens just because he had a weak body. Before the start of the new school year, Carl had a good feeling, because he had become incredibly strong. But the young man couldn't even imagine that he would meet Maya Risen among the girls in his class. But the worst thing was that Wally Simons also entered this very educational institution. No matter how hard the hero tried to avoid these people, they still appeared nearby. EUNUCH had the feeling that fate was deliberately laughing at him and his modest plans. To keep abreast of all the events, the boy quietly eavesdropped on Simon's conversations with Risen, so he was the first to guess that the main plot of the story had already begun not so long ago. Maya actively sought Wally's attention, but it was occupied by thoughts of another girl. Their conversations were only interrupted by the teacher, who announced the transfer of a new student to them. This morning, Simons met a girl who, for some reason, couldn't get out of his head, and it so happened that the teacher was talking about this very student when he invited her to the class. Her name was Rika Lawrence, and the girl was given one of the main roles in the comic book plot. She acted so sweet and cheerful that all the boys in the class instantly liked her. From the very beginning, Rika possessed a charm that was difficult for any other girl to develop, and only the hero was wary of the new girl, since he did not want to get close to the characters. He remembered how popular Lawrence had been with readers in his past world, and this meant that EUNUCH had to behave distantly and even rudely with this girl. But the teacher chose a seat for the new girl in the class right between Carl and Wally. At that moment, Simons did not yet recognize Rick as the same girl he had bumped into that morning, but the girl immediately noticed the rude guy who didn't really help her at their morning meeting. The teacher was not stopped by the fact that the two students were not very well disposed towards each other. The girl and the guy had to be neighbors, despite all the inconvenience of such closeness. Rika's whole appearance showed how unprepared she was to communicate with Wally. However, the girl acted honestly, since she gave the guy the thing she found in the morning. In this situation, the hero only dreamed of being transferred from this class to another as soon as possible. But despite all his desire, he could not leave Sam completely alone among other people. Until now, Carl had been interested in reading comics, but all this was only for the sake of a good cover. Any information from the manga was useful to the hero who wanted to prepare for unexpected turns. At that moment, Wally felt the urge to talk to Rika, who hadn't had time to meet the guys. The guy was so persistent that the girl finally gave in to him and went to talk. EUNUCH couldn't miss such a good opportunity to learn more about the characters, but as soon as he stepped out into the corridor, the students immediately moved away from the young man. Carl looked like the son of a mafia boss, even though his parents only owned a restaurant. But this deterrent effect played into the hands of the guy who didn't want to make new friends. Now it was more important for EUNUCH to collect all the information about the conversation between Ricky and Wally. This is because he had not yet studied the characters' personalities, so he had trouble predicting their actions. The boys could only talk in private in one place, which was right behind the school. Simons called the new girl only to apologize for the morning skirmish. Carl arrived just in time to catch Wally in such an embarrassing and awkward position. Lawrence clearly didn't expect the guy to take what happened to them so seriously. It turned out that Ricky had no intention of being angry at her classmate, as she was a good girl. For her, the morning meeting was just a trifle, not worth worrying about. So the girl did not hold a grudge against Simons, for whom it was important to resolve all misunderstandings. From the bushes, Carl could clearly hear this strange conversation, during which the characters were making peace, as he thought. The girl quickly forgave the guy, although he did not expect such a turn of events. In his surveillance, the hero completely forgot that someone else might notice his actions, and so it happened that soon Carl was called out while he was doing something that was not the most appropriate. It turned out that Sarah Camry was the one looking for him, and few dared to argue with her words. This was all because the girl was the daughter of an influential family, which was very noticeable. She was given a minor role in the plot, as she had little interaction with Simons. But even next to such a girl, the hero had to behave more carefully and modestly. At that moment, the guy couldn't think of anything better to do than quickly choose decorations for the office. It was unclear from Sarah's face what exactly she thought about EUNUCH's strange decision, but the hero remained so confident and calm that it was difficult not to trust his words. So Camry accepted this gift for the office, although she considered it unremarkable. The hero could not even imagine that this selective girl would unexpectedly accept his idea. At that moment, he had no idea that many girls would pay attention to him. Sarah had been secretly chasing Carl since the beginning of the school year, but he was only thinking about the plot. The girl had been dreaming for several days about going to the canteen with Younger, but she had no idea that this food would not suit her due to her taste preferences. The young man tried to explain to Sarah that her great idea would end at the very beginning, but Camry had trained specifically, trying different types of commoner food beforehand. She came to Carl's restaurant several times, and there she chose the most pleasant dish for herself. But Younger knew that the girl would not like the food choices in the cafeteria. Sarah was very wrong when she thought that the students would be fed unusual delicacies. Camry was so used to eating something unusual that she wasn't ready to try regular food. For the young aristocrats, such food had until now been an insurmountable barrier to nutrition. Even the hero didn't know how to help the poor girl in such a difficult situation for her. Even Carl wouldn't be able to find anything tasty to eat for students for such a picky lady. If it weren't for the appearance of Erin Santiago, who was the lady's assistant, everything could have ended sadly. With the arrival of Erin, all the romantic mood of Camry quickly evaporated completely. The assistant treated Younger with contempt, considering him an unworthy friend for Sarah. Each time, Santiago accidentally put Camry in an awkward situation, which he himself did not realize. If only the guy knew that Younger didn't care about his words, he would have behaved differently. And so, Sarah constantly defended her friend from the attacks of her assistant, who wanted what was best for her. But Erin stubbornly did not notice that his actions only made the young lady more tense. So once again, Camry had to run away with Erin so that he wouldn't say anything unnecessary. Until the very end, the assistant believed that he was sincerely protecting Sarah from her nasty classmate. But Carl still didn't care about Erin's words, which meant nothing to him. Except for such strange moments, the rest of the hero's life went on calmly and quietly. The guy enjoyed the fact that no one dared to approach him. This is exactly what Younger was aiming for from the very beginning, when he wanted the characters not to touch him. As a result, only Sam was not afraid to communicate with a friend he had known since childhood, and the hero liked the fact that people tried to avoid him just because of his impressive appearance. Carl would give a lot to be left alone and unnoticed by any of the characters, but at that very moment, all of Younger's dreams were destroyed, because Rika appeared nearby. It was this girl that the hero did not want to get close to, but Lawrence did not care about the guy's wishes. Rika acted sweet and cheerful because she had such a pleasant communication style since childhood. As soon as she saw a familiar face at the bus stop, the girl asked for help without any problems. It turned out that Lawrence was completely unfamiliar with the city, having only recently moved there with her family, so she used all her charm to get the answers she needed. The girl's behavior shocked the young man so much that he couldn't find what to say to her in response. Rika wasn't shy about talking to a guy she barely knew because she genuinely needed help. But the hero found himself in an unusual situation since he would prefer solitude to communication. In this situation, the guy had no idea what to do to make Lawrence stop stalking him. Somehow, Rika became the second person who wasn't intimidated by the hero's appearance. The girl sat closest to the guy during class, so she was able to look at him closely. That's why she was sure that Carl was a good man, despite his menacing appearance. For the hero, this only meant that in a short time he had become embroiled in an unwanted friendship. The guy couldn't even imagine that one of the important characters would pay attention to him so quickly. Rika clearly didn't want to leave the guy's side because she needed help finding her way. This is one of the reasons why Carl didn't have a chance to drive away the cheerful girl. All of the hero's plans for a quiet life were instantly destroyed by one meeting with Lawrence, all because the girl planned to become a real friend for the shy and silent student. Quite quickly, the young man realized that frightening the new girl was a useless and thankless task. Rika was one of those people who could perceive any word as something interesting and exciting for her, so the young man had no choice but to continue to threaten with his appearance. But Lawrence had already figured out Carl's true identity, so she didn't pay any attention. It turned out that all this time the girl needed help to get home. She had just moved recently and had already managed to get confused about the necessary stations in this city. Since his rebirth, Younger had studied the area so well that he could explain everything with his eyes closed. So Ricky was lucky to come across such a smart guy who was willing to help. The only thing that bothered Carl was that he didn't know much about the backstory and character of the cheerful Lawrence. He never finished reading the main book story because it was unfinished, but any information from Ricky would be useful to Carl, who was trying to keep an eye on Simons. With Lawrence's help, the hero had a greater chance of influencing the story's plot, guiding it correctly. So from that moment on, Ricky became a means for Carl to achieve his life goal. Younger knew how to take good care of girls so that they felt at ease in his company, but there was a feeling that Lawrence was happy even with a harsh word from Carl. Ricky only now admitted that it had been a long time since she had allowed herself to have such fun outside the home. This is all because for a long time she was making the dream she left behind in her previous city come true. So Lawrence was one of the famous models, which is why she didn't have time for friends. But now everything had changed radically. Since Rika no longer had to work so much, as soon as Carl noticed that the girl was different from the photo, he faced the new girl's wrath. And at that moment, the hero was saved from a quarrel only by the arrival of the train that Lawrence needed. Even in the company of such a beautiful girl, Carl constantly caught curious glances at himself. Younger has long been accustomed to the fact that he constantly attracts attention to himself because of his appearance. It was not easy for him to cope with Ricky's eternal questions, who could not remain silent for long. But the guy had already taken responsibility for the girl's journey home, so it was too late to refuse. This is how Younger soon escorted Lawrence to the right train, so that she would definitely not get lost. With her whole appearance, Rika showed at parting that she would definitely communicate with Carl tomorrow. But all this time, the hero tried to avoid friendship with characters who were only part of the story, so he couldn't understand why Lawrence approached him and not the handsome Simon. The next morning at the university began calmly for the hero, who tried not to be seen. But already during lunch, the guy heard a familiar female voice that finally found him. All this time, Rika tried to make sure that Younger was no longer alone, so she felt sorry for the guy, who even ate lunch away from all the other students, to the point of tears. The hero never managed to explain to the girl that he had chosen this path for himself from the very beginning. For some time, Lawrence tried to persuade Younger to stop hiding from people, but soon she noticed the lunch the guy had taken with him and turned her attention to it. Carl didn't expect Ricky's attention to be so distracted, because she had just been on the verge of tears. And now, Lawrence was thinking only about the delicious food that the guy always took with him. It was hard to resist such stubbornness and curiosity, so Carl had to share. As he thought, Lawrence appreciated the dish that his family had been developing for many years. From that moment on, the girl completely forgot that she had recently been sad because of her friend's loneliness. Rika herself kept Younger company, so she no longer worried about his condition. As a result, they even exchanged food, something the hero had never done before in his life. And the first experience turned out to be terribly sweet, since Lawrence liked to add a lot of sugar. As the son of chefs, Carl knew well that such sugar consumption was unhealthy. The young man carefully monitored not only his sports but also his diet, so he used salt more often. Lawrence found these eating habits so strange that she just laughed. The two would have remained alone for a long time if other students had not noticed them. Sarah Camry couldn't allow love affairs to develop on campus. In fact, the girl didn't understand everything that way. But in such a situation, it was difficult to think about anything else. The aristocrat had long had feelings for Carl, so his behavior greatly offended her. The girl couldn't stay away when she saw two students having such a nice conversation. But Younger still didn't understand what exactly his friend, who was monitoring the rules at the university, was accusing him of. As usual, Aaron, who always and for everything scolded Carl, came to the aid of the lady. The hero tried to avoid conflict with this man as much as possible. Suddenly, Lawrence came to Younger's aid, attracting all attention to herself. Sarah didn't expect the new girl to be so sociable and curious, even with her. It turned out that Rika had heard several rumors about the Camry, which had a nickname. But for the aristocrat, this was news, since she rarely interacted with other students. Lawrence, out of the kindness of her heart, told Sarah everything she had learned about her recently. And this information seriously angered Camry, because it seriously damaged her high status. But what could one rich student do against the rumors that were being spread all around? Ricky didn't see any problem with this, since she treated everyone well. Lawrence had no idea that her words had incredibly embarrassed the young girl. As a result, this time Sarah backed down because she had more important problems to deal with. The girl couldn't stay around people who knew about his interesting nickname for long. This is how the two friends were able to remain in each other's company again, although Carl did not want this. That evening, Lawrence found Younger again before heading home. The girl wanted to go through all the clubs at the university together, which were mandatory classes. Carl tried not to take part in anything. Now the teachers were forcing him to. So the young man agreed to go for a walk with Ricky around the clubs to choose the most suitable one for himself. Everything inside the hero burned with curiosity at the thought that he would be able to test his strength. Many students worked hard to get accepted into the club, but in football specifically, it was not strength that was valued as much as the ability to hit the ball into the goal. So the two hooligans couldn't find a place for themselves in the football club, despite all their desire. These guys were a big nuisance to the main team of football players by just running around the field. As soon as someone said even a word to the guys, they responded with terrifying threats to everyone around them. And so it was until team captain Ray Jensen decided to protect his players. The guy became famous not only for his football skills, but also for his incredible strength in fights. So the hooligans did not dare to object in response, since they would definitely lose to this man. This is where the story of the two fools on the football field ended. As they did not want to join the club, Ray always personally selected everyone who was willing to give everything he had to teach football. The only thing that worried Jensen was that no one of promise had joined the club yet. He only encountered hooligans who saw football as a temporary event. The guys still bullied everyone around them as soon as someone looked at them the wrong way. And then one of them accidentally collided with another student, which was an outrageous incident. He immediately expressed his dissatisfaction, feeling his own superiority. But Carl's appearance was so frightening that he didn't have to say anything. People ran away from him at the first opportunity just to save their lives. But in fact, Junge did not plan to harm anyone, because at heart, he was a good person. Carl had already become accustomed to the fact that people judged him by the cover, and did not try to understand his feelings and desires. But Rika blamed her friend for everything, because he didn't even try to behave differently when he saw other people. Meanwhile, the football players were training hard on the field until they saw the menacing figure of Carl. Lawrence first brought her friend here to try his hand at football, but at the sight of such a scary student, many decided that he came for a fight or profit. Ray was ready to stand up for his students so that no one would dare to harm them on the field. For the captain, all the worries of his friends were unnecessary since they had heard too few rumors. But Jensen was confident that such a dangerous man would not waste time on small-time athletes. However, he was still wary of a man who could defeat anyone with one blow. Ray was calm enough not to show even a drop of fear on his face when he saw the tall hero. Carl had no idea how much he scared people just because he was taller and bigger. Although Jensen always boasted about his physical attributes, next to Junge, he felt like a weakling. But for a young captain, such a strong person on the team would be a real find. From that moment on, Ray was fired up with the idea of definitely attracting Junge to the football club. All that was needed was for Carl to pass the entrance exam, and he would be accepted. The hero took too seriously the fact that he would only have one chance to kick the ball. The young man decided to put all his strength into avoiding embarrassment in front of the football players. He had been practicing a special technique in the gym for a long time now, which was especially strong. As a result, the hero's kick was so strong and swift that no one noticed it. The footballers held their breath in anticipation of the result, because their final team depended on it. Even Ray didn't open his eyes from Carl, as it was the first time he had seen such an amazing person. But the goal remained empty, as the ball never even got close to it. The whole point was that Junge's strike was so brutal that the ball simply deflated on the spot. This turn of events did not please the young man, who would have liked to receive more return from his actions. So together with Rika, he headed to the next club, since he changed his mind about going into football. Junge's actions quickly became known throughout the university, as news spread quickly among students. So one of the girls, who was the captain of the sports club, was already preparing to meet him. The hero then tried himself as a basketball player in the hope that his height would help him. Rika chased him away when, after his first throw, Carl accidentally broke the ring. Approximately the same destruction awaited the young man on the baseball field, where he not only lost the ball, but also broke the bat. Soon, Junge was kicked out of the tennis club because he accidentally made a hole in the net. Time after time, Rika would cross out another section because Carl refused to participate. So after a few hours of searching, the guy was so exhausted that he didn't want to go anywhere anymore. But Lawrence had a cunning plan to get her friend interested in something else. The girl prepared her story brilliantly, as if she had been doing this all her life. Carl didn't even have to do anything to get the information he needed. Lawrence was primarily interested in the track and field section, where she could also take part. Afterwards, the girl was not averse to studying the swimming section, in which many achieved results. And in the end, Rika was sure that the kendo section would suit Carl, since he was very strong. Carl specifically selected these electives, since the others were already afraid of Junge. She could only hope that the guy would listen to her humble advice. But Lawrence didn't expect Carl to immediately notice that she had previously been involved in acting. Rika had been trying to hide her talent from her friends all this time because it was causing her inconvenience. But the girl actually had some acting experience in her life, as she worked in a similar field. Junge's intuition told him that it would be better not to ask any further questions. Lawrence looked carefree, but who knows what she'd been through over the years. At that moment, the girl pulled the guy to the next section, so he didn't find out anything else. Near the kendo club, its members were already waiting for Carl, since rumors about him had spread throughout the university. The guy looked warlike even before the battle began, although he didn't even try to scare anyone. Many students gathered at this place to witness Junge's introduction in person, but no one dared to come closer to ask Carl a few simple questions. Rika felt like a fish in water among people, so she introduced herself to everyone as her friend's leader. The hero forgave the girl for all her antics, since he was only interested in the result of his intervention. Fiona Ryle was the captain of the kendo section and volunteered to test her opponent's skills. Carl didn't care who he fought, since he didn't know the difference between the captain and the participants. Since the young man had come here, he intended to make every effort to win the duel. But Fiona was not one to give in to a fight just to please one of her opponents. The girl immediately announced that the one who touches the opponent first in the fight will win. All the kendo participants watched with joy as their captain prepared for battle. The students supported Ryle, who had managed to earn a good status thanks to her strength. Even Rika couldn't have swayed public opinion in Carl's favor in this situation. But after just a minute, everyone had to shut up as an order came from Fiona. The girl hated it when someone interfered with her concentration on the entrance exam, so the students had to resign themselves to waiting outside the doors until the end. Lawrence took a liking to the power that the seemingly fragile dark-haired girl wielded, but Carl felt well that this easy impression was deceptive in relation to Ryle. The girl's aura was so dangerous that no one dared to object to her words. Fiona kept a low profile before the fight so that Younger had time to prepare for it, but the hero was so big that no uniform could fit on his body. As soon as the young man announced the start of the fight, Ryle's expression instantly changed. Their fight started quickly. As Fiona always boldly attacked any opponent first, the girl immediately felt that Carl held his defense well. Even though he didn't know kendo techniques, she had trained since childhood to become an excellent warrior, so she felt an advantage. The hero really had a hard time in this fight because he was used to fighting with his fists, but the guy still didn't step back because he finally felt like he was in his place. But as soon as he opened up for a moment, Fiona immediately knocked the weapon out of his opponent's hands. Carl didn't expect such speed from the young girl, so he didn't have time to react. For Ryle, this was a chance to win since Carl had nothing else to defend himself against her with. Again, Fiona boldly jumped straight towards her opponent to finish this fight. But at that moment, something went wrong. Even though Younger had no weapon in his hands, but his aura reflected such a terrible thirst for blood that it was impossible not to feel it. For the first time in her life, fear gripped Fiona so tightly that she instinctively jumped back. For some time, the girl could not come to her senses after what she saw on Carl's face, but the hero didn't even notice how much he accidentally scared his opponent. While Fiona was no longer going to prolong the battle, which was dangerous for her, she gathered all her strength for one strike, as this stance was difficult to perform. But Ryle saw no other way to win, so she decided to take such a huge risk. The girl's movements were so fast that Carl didn't have time to notice any trick. So soon, he received the very injury that would have knocked any man off his feet. But the young man hardly moved from the spot, as he had been training his muscles a lot. Fiona was so focused on a quick victory that she didn't notice that her blow had no effect. But in a fight, you always need to remain attentive, otherwise the next blow will land on you. Carl's response was so strong that Fiona was no longer able to fight. The girl didn't even have time to understand what exactly happened before she slowly fell onto the cold floor. Before losing consciousness, she nevertheless noticed that Younger was still standing firmly on his feet. This is because the guy's own muscles were so strong that he didn't feel anything. As a result, the next morning everyone was talking about Carl's little clubbing trip. Of course, the hero heard all these whispers, but he had no intention of reacting to them in any way. He was ashamed only because his actions had attracted so much attention to himself. All this time, the guy hoped that Wally would soon attract most of the attention, but at the very least, Rika would never leave Carl alone, since she already considered him her friend. This morning, everything would have been calm if not for the appearance of one noisy, red-haired person. As usual, Simons turned out to be the man this unknown girl needed. Her name was Tori Nielsen, and she had come to defend the honor of the junior high club. Carl watched what was happening from the sidelines with pleasure, since his participation was not required. Soon, Maya, who had long had feelings for this guy, came to Wally's aid. So Raisin bravely stood up to defend her beloved, who was accused of some wrongdoing. Tori mistakenly believed that her friends were being unfairly targeted, but this turned out to be untrue. It took Maya just a few minutes to explain to the redhead the whole truth about her friends. It so happened that it was Raisin who almost suffered at their hands, so she was angry. The girl could only hope that Tori would silently leave their office, but Nielsen had personal motives from the very beginning, as she wanted to date Valley. Simon saw this girl for the first time in his life, so he couldn't say anything to her in response. But for Maya, this was a real shock, since she was the one who wanted to be with the guy. But Tori wasn't deterred by the curious glances from the outside, so she boldly confessed her feelings. In this situation, it was too late for Raisin to shout that she too had loved Wally for a long time. Rika almost took popcorn with her, but she watched the developments with great interest. Who would have thought that Nielsen would be so brave and confident in her feelings? Everyone around was interested in which of the girls Simons would ultimately choose as his partner. Many favored the cute Raisin, who was the favorite in the group, but there were also those who believed in Nielsen's victory, as she quickly impressed the guys. The hero did not interfere in all these thoughts, since he did not care about Wali's choice. Carl saw Tori's actions as simply following the general plot, in which everyone falls in love with the character. He could only hope that the actions of others would not affect his peaceful life in any way. But Rika couldn't let go of this situation, as she was burning with curiosity to continue. The girl tried in every way to find out from her friend what his assumptions were, but Jungers stubbornly said nothing, in order to continue to remain in the shadow of the main characters. He knew that according to the plot, Wally was supposed to stay with Maya, but it was impossible to talk about it. Suddenly, Rika declared that it would be Tori who would win Simon's heart if all the conditions came together. The girl declared herself an expert in love, and would definitely give Nielsen the necessary advice. The hero had never heard of anything like this before, but that didn't stop the dreamy Lawrence. Although in reality, no one was interested in the opinion of Ricky, who had never even met her. Carl didn't disappoint his friend by saying that it was unlikely that Nielsen would come to her at all. So for the rest of the day, Rika herself dreamed of helping the girl who was experiencing love. The next morning, the hero found an unexpected surprise right on the threshold of his office. It turned out that Tori was so stubborn that she followed Simon's everywhere. That's why she decided to sit in their office until Wally agreed to go for a walk with her. From the outside, the girl made it look like she wanted to treat Simons to lunch as an apology, but it was clear to everyone that Tori wanted a real date, but was hiding behind this pretext. The hero had never heard of this character before, and couldn't even find any information in the book. His friend found out that Nielsen was the daughter of an important person from the mafia crew. The father loved his daughter so much that he could easily use his influence to take revenge for her, so it was dangerous for any guy to offend Tori, despite all the strangeness in her behavior. But the hero was not ready to believe such truth, even though he was in the comic book world. While Sam was sure that from now on they had to be wary of this girl, but as soon as Carl reminded him that Tori had done nothing wrong, his friend's opinion changed dramatically. Junger really didn't care. Even if Nielsen was the daughter of a very terrible man, the girl behaved just like the other girls, demanding attention from Simons. But Maya desperately defended the guy, although she herself did not dare ask him out on a date. So for a long time, all the students watched the drama that unfolded right before their eyes. Tori was so determined that she found poor Wally everywhere every day. Soon the girl began to cross all boundaries because of her desire to walk with the young man. For a long time, Simon silently endured this persecution, which greatly spoiled his life. But the guy's nerves gradually began to give way, as he did not dare give the girl a direct answer. All this time, Carl tried not to interfere with the development of the plot, so as not to become part of it. But it was difficult for the guy to avoid communicating with Rika, since she joined him everywhere. What surprised Junger most was that the girl dared to invite him to her place on the weekend. It turned out that Lawrence's apartment was almost completely filled with manga, and she didn't mind giving it away. This greatly interested the hero, as it corresponded to the image he had built. Rika was only glad that her relationship with her only friend was gradually improving. Despite all her sociability, the girl was never able to get close to anyone else. So Lawrence practically stalked Carl because she hated being alone. But there could be no talk of any romantic relationship between them at such a young age. During the conversation, the girl became so engrossed in the conversation that she didn't notice how another person sat down next to her. It turned out that Tori couldn't find another seat in the cafeteria, so she took the only one that was free. Nielsen had no plans to communicate with anyone, as all she could think about was Simons. But Rika couldn't pass up such a wonderful opportunity to play the role of a love expert. Tori was indeed lacking in practice, so she was not opposed to any help with her case. Word that Lawrence knew a thing or two about love quickly reached Nielsen, who needed advice. So the girl still turned to Rika for help, although she was lying about herself. But Tori was so embarrassed that Lawrence didn't have time to say a word in response. That's how it all came to pass that Nielsen had powerful support in the form of young Lawrence. Until the very end, Carl could not understand why such a strange situation had happened. As a result, both girls quickly became almost best friends, since they had an important reason for communicating. While Carl remembered that in the original plot, they were supposed to compete with each other. But right now, the young man had no desire to think about it, since it was time for his training. The gym was hectic today as the athletes trained hard and without rest. Previously, the hero had only noticed such stubbornness in himself, but at that moment, everything suddenly changed. Only a few minutes later did Junger learn the reason why the athletes had dedicated themselves to training. The whole point was that Fiona visited the hall, and many guys performed in front of this beautiful girl. The last thing Carl expected was to meet his recent rival in his favorite place. It turned out that after her defeat, the girl decided to take up her training even more. Only now did Carl realize why his friends had become so persistent in doing the exercises. Fiona truly deserved to have guys competing for her attention and heart. But Junger had no intention of seducing the girl, since he was not allowed to interfere with the main plot. As luck would have it, whenever Carl tried to distance himself from the characters, they appeared around him time after time. Even the club's director, Valerie Marsh, accidentally helped bring Younger closer to Ryle. He wanted such a beautiful girl to continue visiting the sports club, attracting other visitors. Besides, Valerie wanted to find at least someone for Carl, who seemed to avoid any communication with girls. As a result, Younger did not have time to explain to the old man that he had misunderstood the situation, so the hero had to take part in a demonstration of his powers and abilities in order to surprise everyone. Fiona was amazed by the fact that the head of the club was not afraid to give Carl incredibly heavy weights. But for the hero who trained a lot, despite the pain and fatigue, it was as easy as pie. So soon, Younger demonstrated how strong and prepared he was. However, the coach didn't stop there, because only Carl could lift absolutely any weight. By the time Younger finished his demonstration, he had had a pretty good workout. It was not without reason that Valerie was proud of Carl's successes, since he personally raised him for a long time. Fiona almost immediately noticed something strange in the energy of the young man, with whom she had not interacted at all before. But now she saw that he was incredibly strong, which was noticeable even from his masculine in her family. There were myths about people who achieve great results in the future. Fiona personally became convinced that there was some kind of exceptional ability inside Carl. Her missing father had been searching for such people for a long time in order to recruit them for his team. But now, Younger had no time to communicate with Fiona, because Nilsson had invited him and Riku to visit. The guy himself was shocked by the luxurious conditions in which this fragile-looking girl lived. He had her own butler in her house, who carefully examined all new guests. And the hero's appearance played a bad joke here too, since he was mistaken for a harmful enemy. The man continued to curse Carl for a long time, as he did not look like an ordinary student at all. If Tori hadn't protected her new friend, the assistants would have definitely thrown Younger out of the house. This was not the first time that Carl had encountered such injustice, although he had done nothing to anyone. But what surprised the hero most was that it was Nilsson who asked for forgiveness for the behavior of her subordinates. The guy was reluctant to go visiting from the very beginning, as he didn't understand much about love affairs. But Lawrence felt more confident around her friend, so she didn't let him go home. The girl was charged to the maximum, wanting to teach Tori a lot in a short time. They spent the entire day trying to get Nilsson to create something resembling a delicious lunch. He was happy even with this result, since she had never tried to cook before. Carl didn't remind the girl how much effort he had put into helping her at least a little. Younger was already happy that Tori had at least learned to understand the essence of cooking. Soon, everyone was seriously hungry, so it was the hero's turn to show off his skills. Since his appearance in this world, the boy often helped his parents with food, so he knew a lot. So it was not difficult for him to conduct a real masterclass, for which not everyone was ready. The girls couldn't take their eyes off their friend's skillful actions, which captivated them from start to finish. Once they tasted his food, Tori and Rika were filled with respect for the skills of the strong Carl. For the hero, something like this was an easy task, since he had been preparing it for himself for a long time. Previously, his mother prepared his meals, but the young man felt awkward seeing how she spent her free time. That's why he learned to cook his own food, so that he wouldn't have to depend on anyone. While the friends enjoyed the care of their parents, they didn't think about cooking. Only now did Lawrence remember that she had brought a very nice gift for Nilsson. The girl bought all kinds of cosmetics in advance so that Tori could get her face in order for the walk. Rika devoted all her free time to making sure her friend's date ended well. Even Tori didn't approach the preparation issue so responsibly, because she knew too little. What surprised Nilsson most was that her clothes also required modifications for the date. Carl didn't expect that the girls, who were supposed to be rivals in the plot, would become such friends. For Ricky, there were no barriers in communicating with Tori, whom she liked for her behavior. So soon the girls wanted to retire to deal with the rest of their affairs in person. Lawrence was stubborn when it came to implementing her ideas, no matter how crazy they were. But only recently, she stated that Carl's opinion was the most important thing to her. Until the evening, the young man waited for the girls to finish all the preparations for the important date. He did this because he was afraid to let Rika go alone in the city at night, where there were a lot of people. Along the way, the hero became interested in a manga shop, since he had been trying to collect it until now, so Younger couldn't afford to pass by, because it wouldn't fit with his image in the plot. It so happened that Lawrence was also interested in this store, so she agreed to go. At that moment, the girl was only worried about whether she had gone too far in caring for Tori. But Carl was sure that a bad person would not worry so much about other people. For the first time in her life, someone called Lawrence good, because even her father had almost no time to look after his daughter. This embarrassed the girl so much that she couldn't even joke back as usual. All this time, Rika had no idea how pleasant simple compliments were for her. As a result, Lawrence could think of nothing better to do than run away from her good friends so as not to be embarrassed. It was just a short distance to her house, so Rika took advantage of this circumstance. At that moment, EUNUCH still didn't understand what feelings he had accidentally made his young friend experience. Lawrence's lessons were not in vain, as Tori was especially determined the next morning. Nielsen was very embarrassed by the intense stares, but she still went to meet her beloved. There was very little time left before the weekend, so the girl personally invited Wally for a walk. And this time, Simons couldn't refuse when he saw the girl's appearance change so much. In their joy, the girls decided to celebrate by going clothing stores, and this time they took Carl with them. Although the guy did not show a strong desire in this matter, the young man felt a little strange choosing women's clothes with his friends, but he kept silent for their sake. Since it was difficult for Rick to refuse, EUNUCH went with them instead of going to the gym. Lawrence was beaming with joy as she went shopping with her friend for the first time in a long time. She quickly picked out some beautiful outfits for Tori before the girl even had time to look around. Now, Nielsen was forced to go to the fitting room, even though they had just arrived. Tori was instantly horrified by how cute Lawrence had chosen her style, but there was no point in stopping Riku if she had made a decision for herself. Carl personally liked Tori in casual clothes, as he didn't understand the importance of a date. It soon became clear that Lawrence rarely wore dresses, and that was why she felt uncomfortable in them. But as soon as the girl heard a compliment from EUNUCH, she quickly came to terms with her embarrassment. Once Tori managed to attract the attention of one guy, then Simons might like her too. But none of the friends suspected what was now happening in the wealthy Nielsen house. The girl's father gathered all his subordinates to resolve an important issue at a meeting. Nate was the head of a huge mafia group, but he tried not to tell anyone about it. And now the man has learned that Tori might have had her first boyfriend. The head of the Nielsen family had no intention of entrusting his only daughter to just anyone. He had asked Sam's assistant in advance to obtain all the information on this important matter. In the end, the ally even managed to get hold of a video about Wally, who no one here liked. When Nate found out Tori had a date, he nearly destroyed the entire room. The man immediately announced a general meeting for the weekend to personally oversee everything. His assistants were only too happy to help, since they themselves always looked after the young lady. Meanwhile, the boys were relaxing quietly in a cafe after a long walk. Tori was grateful to her friends for dedicating so much of their free time to her preparation. But Ricky had a personal interest from the very beginning, as she wanted to be an expert in love. Only Carl remained with them without any motive, as he was asked to participate. As a thank you, Nielsen treated her friends to lunch and wanted them to eat more. Previously, EUNUCH saw the girl only as a hooligan, but she turned out to be a good and kind girl. To his surprise, the hero soon discovered that he enjoyed hanging out with girls. Tori was eager to share her worries and plans for the long-awaited walk with Wally, but suddenly Rika stopped her friend. Because she didn't like her too simple plan for the walk, Lawrence truly believed that for a date you had to come up with something amazing and incredible. And the Oceanarium fit this description perfectly, as it seemed like a fairy tale place to everyone. Lawrence couldn't have come up with anything better, as this was a frequent meeting place. Rika had imagined many times how she and her loved one were walking around beautiful fish. EUNUCH had no idea that Lawrence would press his expertise on the matter so hard. For friends who were having a good time together, the whole day flew by quickly and unnoticed. And now they were seeing Tori off with smiles, her heart skipping a beat in anticipation of the date. But Rika didn't stop there. As a playful and complex plan was born in her head, the girl would like to follow Nielsen to keep an eye on her important date. But the hero didn't have a chance to refuse, since Lawrence had already made the decision for him. This is how the girl organized a secret duet that would continue to help Tori on dates. A little later, people on the city streets felt uneasy due to the appearance of strange individuals. Nate Nielsen went out for a walk to personally explore the place where his daughter would be walking. The very next morning, Tori came to meet Wally, which she had been trying to get to for a long time. The guy was a little late, but still met the beautiful Nielsen with a joyful smile. At the sight of Simons, all the girls' sad thoughts instantly disappeared without a trace. They both felt awkward meeting under such circumstances, but the guys tried to hide it. Tori didn't expect to immediately receive a good compliment from a guy because of her appearance. From that moment on, the girl could feel nothing but joy at meeting Wally. They took their time talking about important things, gradually getting to know each other better. At this point, Carl and Rika had already taken up observation positions, quickly finding their friends. Lawrence kept a particularly close eye on Tori's movements to make sure she didn't lose sight of her. It so happened that the girl's father also watched her first love blossom. The man immediately disliked Simons because he dared to make his daughter wait outside. But the group had more important problems. As people began to look at them suspiciously, Deputy Sam was sure that they should split up to avoid attracting attention. This time, Nielsen listened to his ally, even though he was very nervous about his daughter's walk. While Rika was an undercover agent, that didn't stop her from enjoying delicious food. Due to her love for delicious food, the girl completely forgot that she had to look after Nielsen. While Yoonga was carefully watching the people around him, of whom for some reason there were many, soon the strangers became so intrusive that even Lawrence noticed their presence. The hero was most annoyed by the man whose appearance did not say anything good about him. But this man was sitting calmly in the cafe, so Carl had no reason to argue. Yoonga could only hope that Tori herself would not notice anything suspicious. It turned out that the girl was so infatuated with Wally that she really didn't look around. Tori's face was beaming with happiness. Because she had finally gotten the date she wanted with her beloved, only her friends realized that Nielsen's date would not be able to take place in a calm atmosphere. Rika and Carl continued to follow their friend even in the cramped and uncomfortable space of the subway. It was rush hour now, so Lawrence had to cling to the strong Yoonga. The girl was so embarrassed that she completely forgot that she needed to keep an eye on her friend's date. Carl didn't seem to mind such close contact, although it was forced because of the crowd. Since they found themselves in such a situation, the young man tried to provide his girlfriend with maximum comfort. But Tori and Wally weren't going to wait for anyone, as they didn't even suspect they were being followed. Carl only managed to pull his friend out of the crowded train at the last moment. He was in such a hurry that he forgot to let the girl go when the danger had already passed. This made Ricky's face blush even more, and his heart began to beat treacherously loudly. But Lawrence was not against such touches. Although she was not yet aware of her feelings, too late, Yoonga realized that he had crossed the line, but his girlfriend did not scold him in any way. But because of this incident, they still missed Tori and Wally because there were a lot of people around. Carl couldn't think of anything better than to follow the boys' intended route. Suddenly, he again noticed the unknown men who had been sitting in the cafe next to them. This circumstance made the hero even more tense, as he was used to constant fights with such people. But now, Yoonga didn't want to get into a showdown because they could accidentally lose their friends completely. So the guy hurried to take Rika away from the suspicious individuals who were following them. But the hero's behavior only further attracted the attention of Tori's formidable father. The man did not immediately recognize the two students as the very friends his daughter had boasted about. But Assistant Sam remembered how these guys came to visit them several times, so the boss decided to keep an eye on his daughter's friends since he had lost sight of Tori and her boyfriend. The boss didn't want his beloved daughter to spend time in the company of a stranger all alone. Although he still stood out from other people, he was not bothered by these problems. Meanwhile, Tori and Wally finally made it to the aquarium, which had impressed them from the moment they entered. They were happy in each other's company, even if this joy lasted only a day. Due to inattention, the guys did not notice that students from the university were passing by. At that moment, for Nielsen and Simons, no one existed but themselves. But the hooligans couldn't miss such a good opportunity to take revenge on the impudent Wally. They had been envious of his popularity for a long time, and now the guy was also walking with a beautiful girl. Luckily, Rika and Carl found friends in time so they could come to their aid. Yoonga watched Tori's emotions carefully, making sure not a drop of sadness flashed across her face, and the girl shone so brightly and joyfully that even her father would not have dared to ruin her date. So the hero even began to doubt whether their presence was necessary. The oceanarium was followed by lunch in the park, as picnics were especially popular among young people. Naturally, Rika and Carl took up a good observation position not far from their friend. But Lawrence accidentally forgot about the mission again as soon as delicious food appeared before her eyes. It was only at the last moment that the girl decided to check how things were going with Nielsen, and it turned out that Tori was terrified to offer Wally the dinner she had prepared herself. But Yoonga personally checked to make sure that his friend's cooking turned out well, so the girl could be sure that Simons would like all her food. The onigiri and bento really looked like they were made specifically for a magazine cover. Wally was already naively impressed by this, although he didn't even have time to try anything. But soon the guy appreciated Tori's efforts, because her food turned out surprisingly tasty. At that moment, the girl didn't need anything else, because she was only worried about taste. She got a little carried away by her emotions, which added a few romantic notes to the date. Tori herself didn't notice how she grew bolder when she decided to personally treat the handsome guy. Wally had such good manners that he did not refuse the treat that was close by. The guy genuinely enjoyed the walk, as it revealed new sides of Nielsen to him. Rika and Carl watched their friends so intently that they even forgot about food themselves. But Tori and Wally looked like a real couple, even though they didn't start dating each other. Simons has already regretted more than once that he refused to go for a walk with the girl for so long. Now he finally realized how cute even such a bandit could be in appearance. Soon Lawrence stopped worrying about anything going wrong with Tori. Only now did she admit that she herself would like to go on a similar date. But the hero had heard a lot about the girl being an expert in love and walks. But it turned out that Rika had learned all her knowledge from comics and had never even dated anyone. Carl could have said a lot to his friend about this approach, but they had to get ready already. For a long time, Lawrence desperately tried to prove to her friend that she really understood relationships. From the outside, it was clear that Ricky's walking plan was actually working well for Tori and Wally. Friends really enjoyed watching Nielsen happy and not worrying about anything at that moment. But her joy did not last long, as the couple was soon found by the recent hooligans. The boys were burning with the desire to take revenge on Simons, who had recently severely humiliated them. No matter how much Rika wanted to intervene, she still couldn't help her beloved friend. Wally immediately stood up for himself and Tori because he didn't want the girl to get hurt. After all, it was Nielsen who not long ago accused Simons of beating up these unfortunate guys. The hooligans didn't recognize the club mentor in that state, so they pestered the two students. The next time, it was Tori who couldn't take it anymore and turned away from the guys after the truth. But the girl did not expect that she had never been an authority figure for these impudent students. Only now did one of the hooligans realize that it was a painted Nielsen in front of him. The boys' laughter cut unpleasantly into the ears of Tori and Wally, who were confused by the situation. No matter what the girl said, the hooligans were pursuing their goal, so they didn't care. They didn't come empty-handed, as they invited an older boxing acquaintance to come with them. The guys were counting heavily on the help of a man who had never lost to anyone. Craig was a professional athlete since childhood, but his behavior was more reminiscent of a gangster. All that mattered to him was to help his friends, even if they did wrong to other people. Wally understood that he would not be able to protect Tori from such a fighter, and it was better for her to run. But the girl didn't even have time to take a step back before Craig had already grabbed her tightly in his arms. Simons had a chance to save himself, but the guy would never have abandoned Nielsen in such a terrible situation. But he couldn't do anything against the boxer, who knew all his weak points perfectly well. For the first time all day, Tori felt hopeless and terrible, because the date was ruined. The hooligans had no intention of retreating, as the advantage was completely on their side. At that moment, Craig had no idea that Tori and Wally weren't actually walking alone. Seeing his friend suffering, Carl could not stand aside, although he never fought first. But now he had no other choice if Younger wanted to protect his acquaintances from attack. Everything inside the hero burned with rage at the thought that some hooligans had behaved too brazenly. The fighter clearly did not expect to encounter such a strong opponent on the way to his goal. No one had ever dared to hit Craig before, so the boy took this kind of treatment hard. But Carl's appearance frightened the fighter so much that he was ultimately unable to say a word to him. A few minutes ago, Tori's father had just arrived at the park because his team had gotten lost along the way. The assistants were unable to find the girl for some time because there were many people in the park. But soon Sam finally found Tori, who was just starting to have problems with bullies. Carl's assistant had never been in such situations before, so she was afraid to respond normally to the guys. Seeing such injustice, Nate forgot that he was not supposed to show himself. Only at the last moment did the assistant stop the chief, because his daughter would be offended by him for spying on her. If it weren't for Carl's timely intervention, the man would have been forced to break his disguise. But the pressure from the boy inspired faith that he would deal with the hooligans. Only once in his life had Nate experienced such fear at the sight of just one person. It was then that he first encountered the bloodthirsty boss of another organization named Thomas Crone. From then on, Nate would forever remember the feeling of horror that that powerful man inspired. At that moment, the young mafia boss couldn't even move from his spot due to fear of his rival. So Nielsen was very surprised that the young man emanated the same aura. At that moment, the hero didn't care what others thought of him, because the bullies had angered him. Craig was one of those who had never lost, so he was already preparing to enter the battle. The only thing that mattered to Carl was that Tori and Wally managed to run away from the battle. But the enemy didn't care about other people, because he wanted to restore his honor. Without warning, the guy dealt Younger several powerful blows which he had placed well. The hooligans believed in the victory of the elder, who was several times stronger than them in the battle. Craig himself had no doubt that he would quickly deal with some tall students, but none of his blows reached their target, because the hero didn't care. Realizing his helplessness, the fighter rushed into battle again. Although Carl did not respond to him, Craig desperately tried to end the battle with one blow, putting all his strength into his fists. All this was watched with concern by Younger's friends, who did not want him to fail. In fact, the The hero only followed the rules of combat so that the police would recognize it as self-defense. He deliberately missed several blows from the fighter in order to then knock him out with one blow. As a result, it was Craig who suffered the defeat, as he did not even have time to defend himself in response. Younger had only one blow in self-defense, and he made good use of it. The hooligans had so much faith in their elder that all this time they didn't even consider his failure, and now they had to personally fight the man who had just dealt with a professional fighter. There was not a drop of pity in the hero's eyes for the guys who tried to harm his friends. The only weapons the hooligans had left were threats and accusations since their parents were rich. Whoever these guys were, Carl still taught them a good lesson so that they wouldn't hurt anyone in the future. Of course, the hero didn't use all his strength, but even that was enough for the guys. Once the hooligans were scared to death, Younger finally sent them home. None of these guys had any thoughts of getting in the way of Simons and Nilsson again. They didn't forget to take Craig with them, who was still unable to move on his own. As soon as it became safe near Carl, Rika immediately jumped out of her hiding place. The guy himself didn't pay any attention to the wound, as he periodically received worse injuries. But Lawrence immediately took her friend with her to the pharmacy to provide him with medical attention. For the first time in his life, the hero saw how scary the girl was when she was angry, so he didn't argue. Because of the trip to the pharmacy, they did not immediately find their friends, who had lost all desire to walk further. But there was no frank conversation between Wally and Tori, so they did not break up. Nilsson felt terrible because she believed that the fight was her fault, but Simons didn't blame the girl for anything, because it was his desire to save her from the hooligans. Their faces were illuminated by the beautiful rays of the setting sun, and there was no better moment. So Tori finally got her thoughts together to ask her boyfriend out. Although Vale suspected that their walk was a date, he did not expect such a bright ending. Carl and Rika heard everything their friend said perfectly well, and from the side they were delighted with Nilsson's courage. The girl did everything possible to ensure that the guy would not refuse her now. Tori's heart pounded in her chest as she suggested to Vale that they become something more for each other, but no one could have imagined that Simons wouldn't reciprocate Nilsson's feelings. Tori's heart was pounding in her chest as she suggested to Vale that they become something more for each other, but no one could have imagined that Simons wouldn't reciprocate Nilsson's feelings. From the very beginning, Tori was hoping for a positive answer, but it never happened. But in Vale's life, everything was much more complicated, and that's why he still hadn't dated anyone. Until now, the guy hadn't told anyone that he was waiting to meet his childhood love. This reason was too stupid for Tori to calmly accept its existence, but the girl had already been rejected, and it would be wrong to continue to insist on her own. Simons tried to communicate politely with all the girls, so he went for a walk. But with his actions, the guy only gave Tori false hope, and now he took it away. However, Nilsson had enough strength to accept such a sad defeat with dignity. As she said goodbye, the girl even smiled cheerfully at her friend, although in her soul she felt great pain. She could no longer bear to be around the man who had just broken her heart. No matter how hard Rika tried, her advice couldn't melt Wally, who already loved another. Carl personally went after Tori to make sure Lawrence didn't get home too late. Rika didn't even have time to react before her friends disappeared from sight, and it was useless to look for them. Younger acted quickly because he did not want Nilsson to suffer alone. It was not difficult for him to soon find the girl who was trying to hide from everyone. The hero had no idea how to comfort the characters of this world, so he had to improvise. It was clear from Tori's face that she was in great pain after her recent defeat. The girl was in such a sad state that she did not hide her tears from her faithful friend. Carla tried his best to lift Tori's spirits, because that's why he found her. And soon the guy's kind words had an effect on Nilsson, as she felt better in the company. Tori has always been a dreamer, so she will remember Simon's beautiful features for a long time. In fact, she knew from the very beginning that her friends were watching her throughout the day. But the hero had so hoped that his and Rika's conspiracy would remain undiscovered for a long time. As a result, Tori felt even more hopeless, because she had not lived up to her friends' expectations. The girl's heart pricked every time she remembered what happened to Simons. Nicholson didn't want to believe that Valai would still refuse to date her after everything, and now she suffered greatly, because all her efforts had turned out to be useless and stupid. Tori wasn't shy about expressing her emotions in front of her friend, because she could not keep it all inside anymore. Carl found it strange that the characters in this story could suffer so much from emotions. Even Rika increasingly reminded him of a living person, with her own problems and joys. Initially, the hero drew a line between himself and those who were just part of the plot. But now, the guy no longer believed that all the people around him were just characters. He realized how wrong he was when he ignored the problems of the people around him. The young man was not going to make the same mistake again, nor was he going to allow his girlfriend to cry anymore. Surprisingly, Carl's reassurance soon had an effect on Tori, who needed support. Despite her broken heart, the girl found the strength to laugh and smile joyfully. Younger took responsibility not only for Tori's mood, but also for her condition. It was already getting chilly, but the guy couldn't let his girlfriend go home in that state. Once the hero was sure that the girl would not freeze along the way, he was able to begin his plan. Nielsen listened obediently to every word her friend said, as she was unable to argue with him. She didn't really want to go to karaoke, but that's exactly what Carl suggested to her to unwind. Eventually, curiosity overcame sadness, and Nielsen completely forgot that she had recently been rejected. If it weren't for Younger's support, Tori wouldn't have been able to recover for a long time. And now, she no longer thought about Wally, since she had a good trip ahead of her with Carl. The girl's smile quickly returned to Tori's face, who always wanted to be friends with good people. All this time, their conversation was being watched by Nate's group, who was keeping an eye on his daughter. Although the man was angry with Simons, he did not interfere in the relationship between the two boys. He was glad that Tori finally had a real friend who was always ready to help. Throughout his life, Nate had rarely met such good people, but he always valued them highly. So in the future, he will definitely thank Carl for what he did for his daughter. As a result, Tori sang songs from her heart throughout the night in order to quickly forget Simons. All this time, Younger dreamed only of his friend getting tired and them going home, and none of them ever heard calls from Ricky, who was worried about Nielsen's condition. But an even more interesting story happened a couple of days later, when Lawrence ended up in Carl's room. The girl was always curious, so she couldn't stop exploring this place, and the guy had to watch as Lawrence gradually destroyed his entire room. But it was no longer possible to rewind time, because the hero himself was to blame for what was happening at that moment. Initially, they went for a walk together after university, which they did almost every day. But then Ricky's stomach began to make such sad sounds that it was clear that the girl was hungry, and Carl couldn't think of anything better to do than invite her to his family's amazing restaurant. If Younger had known how this thoughtful offer would turn out, he would have thought twice. As usual, Lawrence was delighted with the food, as she always loved good food. Carl was glad to see genuine happiness on the face of a girl who knew how to appreciate every moment. Moreover, Rika quickly found a common language with her friend's mother, which clearly endeared her to him. The guy didn't mind Lawrence showing off her best side in his restaurant, but now the parents will stop asking the hero why he doesn't bring his friends over. But everything changed the moment the girl's curiosity grew incredibly. Before the guy could even show her out the door of the restaurant, Rika was fired up with a completely new idea, and now the girl wanted to personally see the room of the man who impressed her so much. All the young man's attempts to refuse to watch it came to nothing due to his girlfriend's stubbornness. So Carl soon came to terms with the fact that Rika occasionally became uncontrollable. But this time the girl crossed all boundaries when she started laughing at her friend's comics. In fact, Younger simply studied most of them to be prepared for plot twists. But it was no use explaining all this to Lawrence, who had come up with another theory. The hero found salvation from this situation by showing his friends some really good specimens. The guy truly appreciated the story of the samurai, and therefore collected every book in this edition. It turned out that Lawrence was well aware of this story and was able to support her friend's interests. For the first time, the girl met a man who loved these little comics just as much. Before, Rika had never told anyone that her father was the author of these works. Only now did Carl realize that all this time Ricky's last name had been the same as on the cover. But for some reason, it had never occurred to him before that the girl could be a relative of the author. But Rika had actually invited Carl to visit before he found out about her father's work. And now the hero had even more reasons to visit Lawrence's house. Never before had Younger been so happy at the thought of becoming closer to one of the characters in this story. The guy was ready to go visit right now just to meet the great man. But everything had its time, since Carl needed to be well prepared for such an acquaintance. In fact, Rika only recently fell in love with this story, as she had previously read her father's other comics. But this already impressed Carl so much that he practically idolized the great Lawrence. The girl never found the strength to tell her beloved friend the truth. But the book about the samurai didn't just stick in her mind. It intersected with her life. Ricky now also had his own samurai in the form of Younger, who was always ready to come to the aid of his friends. As soon as Lawrence met Carl, she immediately realized what a good person he was. That's why the girl liked to reread the book about the samurai, which reminded her of her friend. The hero's next problems began the very next morning in the form of Sarah Camry. The girl demanded that the guy help her with one event next week. It was then that Younger planned to visit Ricky, and he did not want to cancel the trip. However, Sarah did not even listen to all the objections of the young man, since he was a member of the council. So the hero had no choice but to try to meet Lawrence another day. When Camry was so immersed in the events, it was useless to argue with her about anything. Carl only hoped that getting closer to this girl would not interfere with the main plot. As soon as he returned to class, Sam told his friend all the latest news about the university. It turned out that the hated hooligans finally took the documents in order to transfer to another place. The guy was most pleased about this, since he often encountered impudent bandits. Younger didn't tell his friend that it was he who had frightened those two not long ago. He has so far tried not to influence the plot too much, so as not to interfere with the development of the overall story. And it seemed that the hero's efforts were working, since the teachers paid almost no attention to him. During class, Carl continued to try to wake up Rika, who constantly didn't listen to the assignments. Their new teacher, Mary Rolls, was an intelligent woman, but she spoke too soothingly. Usually, tasks from her always fell only on Younger's friends, so he lived peacefully. But this time, something went wrong, because Mary forced the young hero to rise. Carl did not object to this decision, since he was doing well with his subjects. That's how the whole class heard for the first time that their classmate knew the material so well. Rolls clearly didn't expect the guy at the back of the class to be so smart and savvy. Whatever questions the woman asked him, the guy answered each of them with ease. But in the end, Younger still didn't understand why Mary looked at him with such a strange look. Rolls was clearly embarrassed, even though there was no reason for it to be during the lesson. This made the hero think about why the teacher suddenly started treating him like that. For a long time, he watched the woman attentively, but she did not meet his gaze. As soon as Mary looked at Carl, she immediately turned away from him. All this suggested to the hero that this woman, for some reason, had also become very afraid of him. But Rolls had only recently arrived at the university, and she had already heard bad words about one of the students. But during his life in this world, the hero managed to get used to the fact that everyone around him avoided him. The guy himself was not eager to communicate, and would have walked alone if Ricky had not appeared nearby. But in front of the new teacher, the young man wanted to be an ordinary and diligent student. Meanwhile, the woman discovered that Carl had the best certificate in the group. This greatly puzzled Mary, who had heard a lot of bad things about the tall student. At exactly that moment, the hero appeared in the office, as he wanted to clarify everything with the teacher. Rolls barely had time to close the certificate, since teachers were not supposed to interfere with such things. In Mary's eyes, the student looked like a member of a mafia clan, which is why she was so afraid of him. While Carl just wanted to hear some advice on job search opportunities. As soon as Rolls heard about this, she tried to pull herself together because she was older. The woman took on the responsibility of advising students to help them make choices. But for now, the hero had no idea other than to continue his parents' business. Until now, Mary believed that the Younger family owned one of the mafia groups, so she was very surprised when she heard that the guy would only inherit the restaurant. All of Roll's fears instantly evaporated, as they seemed incredibly stupid to her. From that moment on, the conversation between the teacher and the student went much better and calmer. Based on the exam results, Mary advised the guy to go into some kind of technical specialty. She didn't expect Carl to resist this advice, since she had done so herself. But the hero was of the opinion that it is better to do what you like, rather than what you are good at. In the past, the teacher herself faced a choice, and in the end, she did not follow her interests. So now she was ready to support the student so that he would not regret anything in the future. Mary decided to tell her story so that it could serve as a good lesson for someone. In the past, the girl dreamed of becoming a voice actress, because she watched films about it. Roll's eyes lit up at the thought that she could make it in this area. But all the girl's dreams were shattered by the words of a strict teacher who did not appreciate her desires. As a result, she chose the teaching profession, which seemed the most reliable. It was only a few years later that Mary regretted not having listened to her heart. At that point, it was too late for her to change her education, so she had to accept it. But Carl still had his life ahead of him, and Mary wanted the boy not to have any regrets. The hero was pleased to hear that finally at least one adult supported him. Rolls was the first person to dismiss all the rumors and gossip about the student. Previously, Younger was constantly confronted with the fears of teachers, so he could not talk to anyone. As soon as Carl left the office, the other teachers began to laugh at his reputation. One of the men was sure that Younger was part of a gang and that nothing good awaited him. But Mary quickly explained to her colleague that it was wrong to judge someone based solely on gossip. She herself was convinced that Carl was a good person who could be trusted. And from that moment on, Rolls was forever determined to side with the poor, menacing-looking guy. If it weren't for Mary's support, many teachers would have been afraid of the clever Younger for a long time. Time flew by unnoticed, and the day of the very event arrived where the hero must help. The guy arrived exactly at the appointed time, but for some reason, he couldn't find Sarah anywhere. Only a few minutes later, he spotted the girl among the crowd, which was not easy for him. Camry wasn't in the best mood, as she had been waiting for her friend at the place for quite a long time. But Carl didn't do anything wrong, since he wasn't even late. but he still ended up at fault. The girl didn't care that she waited only because she herself had arrived earlier than necessary. Sarah was used to everyone around her arriving early and not having to wait. But Carl wasn't a member of the Camry family honor club, so he didn't follow their strange rules. In the end, the girl herself realized that arguing was useless, although she could not stop there. As an apology, she demanded that her friend treat her to some delicious ice cream from the kiosk. Only after a compelling argument from Sarah did the hero agree to such a strange forgiveness. As a result, everyone was happy, since ice cream was able to smooth over all quarrels. So Carl quickly forgot about the misunderstanding that arose between him and the girl. Camry was having a blast at the party, which she had organized so well in advance. In fact, the girl didn't just invite the guy with her for no reason. She had a mission to get closer to him. Her faithful assistants constantly whispered to the lady into the microphone what should be done next. They tried their best to make sure Sarah had a good experience on this walk with Carl. As a result, the girl found nothing better to do than admire the surrounding goods. Many of them could have impressed anyone to the depths of their soul. But Camry had no time for that. As soon as Sarah did something wrong, the assistants quickly joined the conversation. As a result, the girl could hardly concentrate on the conversation with Younger because of them. But Sarah herself was unable to understand the guy for whom she had feelings for a long time. It was for this reason that she trusted her father's people, who were well versed in relationships. Now Camry couldn't let Carl continue to boredly read something on his phone. No matter how difficult it was, the girl obediently tried to get closer to her friend. In fact, the hero was having fun at the party, but no one thought to ask his opinion. Using the advice of her assistants, the girl led the guy away from the goods, each of which was very expensive. It was at this moment that Younger finally noticed that Sarah was acting suspiciously, but Camry made every effort to look natural and calm, although in reality she was burning with shame until the assistant suggested going to a clothing store. There, the hero quickly became interested in the kimono. As he remembered that they needed to choose a gift for the guests, Sarah called Carl under the pretext that she herself could not decide on a choice, and now she supported the theory. The girl had no idea that the assistants had placed a fake saleswoman in this store. Her only task was to choose a beautiful outfit, and Camry didn't care about the price of the gift. Once again, Younger was surprised by how much money Sarah had because of her rich parents. Although the guy and the girl had decided on the type of gift, they couldn't find just one. And at that moment, the saleswoman came out and offered Sarah to try on these outfits. At that moment, the hero wanted to finish with the gift as quickly as possible, so he agreed with the woman's opinion. That's how Sarah found herself behind the screen. Although she didn't know where it all could lead her, it turned out that the young lady's personal guard was hiding behind the saleswoman's mask. May had trained under difficult conditions for a long time, so she had an amazing ability to transform herself. She deliberately pushed Sarah to try it on to show off all her beauty. Camry couldn't have imagined how thoroughly her assistants would approach the issue of support. Meanwhile, Carl had no idea that he had fallen into a serious trap, so he had no intention of escaping. He spent time on his phone to avoid getting bored while Sarah tried on outfits, so the guy didn't immediately notice that the girl came out from behind the screen to show herself to him. These clothes could make anyone look beautiful, and Camry had good qualities from birth. For this reason, the hero's heart beat faster at the sight of such incredible beauty. Unsurprisingly, Carl found it difficult to think of the people around him as just characters. Like a real man, he gave Sarah a worthy compliment, and her face turned pink with joy. Younger was sincere in his feelings, because he really did find the Camry beautiful. These words encouraged the girl so much that she no longer doubted her love for her friend. But right now the lady could not confess, because it was still too early. Out of embarrassment, the girl chatted loudly and noisily about everything in a row to hide her emotions. Only when Sarah was alone was she able to fully immerse herself in pleasant memories. The day had just begun, but Camry was already dreaming of it lasting forever next to Carl. As soon as the boy and girl got outside, Sarah attracted the attention of all the passers-by. The girl immediately showed signs of being an aristocrat, as she was used to shining in front of everyone. Camry insisted on appearing in a limousine in the city center. She didn't even consider other options, and Carl had to submit to the girl's wishes. But inside, the young man felt extremely awkward because he was catching glances everywhere. What confused Younger most was the couple who seemed to be taking pictures of him and Sarah. The hero's intuition did not fail him, but this time, the girl's assistants were able to escape in time. Neely and Aaron Santiago made every effort to avoid being seen by Carl, but from time to time, they weren't very successful, even though the assistants ran away in time. The brother and sister tried to put together a good photo report of their young mistress's walk. They had a difficult job because Carl had too good an eye for such things. While Neely and Aaron were out of sight, the hero decided to show Sarah his favorite restaurant. The guy gave the girl enough free time to get used to her new place. Meanwhile, the elder Santiago felt that the call of nature was too strong this time. Once again, he ate something wrong, and the result was not long in coming. They were just near the same restaurant, and the guy couldn't stand it any longer. So soon he looked into the restroom, where he left everything unnecessary and painful with relief. But suddenly, Aaron bumped into Carl at the most inopportune moment. The guy immediately realized that Sarah's assistant had not appeared in this place for no reason. Meanwhile, Camry waited with anticipation for her friend to return so she could continue their walk, but she didn't expect that Younger would bring 2 of her loyal assistants with him. The hero realized that these guys were following him, so he didn't want to let them go outside. As uncomfortable as Sarah felt about the situation, she still didn't fire any of her assistants. This is how the company became somewhat larger, as the assistants accidentally revealed their presence. Camry didn't get mad at Neely because her date with Carl was now in jeopardy. The girl was distracted from her sad thoughts by delicious food because she had never eaten anything like it before. The young lady was always happy to try something new that her cooks would not cook. Neely quickly explained to Sarah how to properly eat this type of new and unusual dish, and soon, Camry dared to try food she hadn't previously considered. As it happened before, Sarah was delighted with the pleasant taste and smell. Everyone around was glad that the lady approved of Carl's choice, as she liked everything. Next on the small company's path was a gaming center, where there were games for every gamer. Sarah instantly became attached to the device, which allowed her to pull out toys for money, and the guys entered into a game battle, and each of them wanted to defeat their opponent. Aaron constantly boasted that soon there would be nothing left of Carl's character. The hero accepted this difficult challenge, although he rarely played such computer games, and as a result, a few minutes later, it was Santiago who lost the game in a resounding manner. The guy had a hard time accepting this fact, since he was used to considering himself the most exceptional. Younger hoped that this would be the end of their arguments, but Aaron only became more enthusiastic. The assistant now wanted to undergo a real test of strength, which only men agreed to. Santiago quickly discounted Carl's entire performance in the game as having nothing to do with reality. Although Aaron hid it for a long time, his body was brilliantly prepared physically. The hero did not expect that his opponent would boast so much about his achievements in sports, but for Meili and Sarah, this was a usual thing, since Aaron often lost his temper. And now the moment had come when no one could stop Santiago from his idea. Until the very end, Carl tried to refuse the stupid test that would not solve anything, but Aaron used skillful manipulations that made it difficult to refuse the fight. The boy had long been envious of Younger's strength, so he desperately tried to get closer to it. That's why this was the perfect chance for him to prove that he was not any weaker. Although Carl still hadn't given a definitive answer, Aaron had already delivered a powerful blow to the machine gun. Now the hero had no other choice, as he found himself under the watchful eyes of people. Sarah knew her assistant's emotionality very well, so she didn't even try to stop him. Camry's family was willing to pay for all the damage, so the hero had no choice. In fact, he refused for so long not because he might lose to Aaron. On the contrary, Younger's strength was so enormous that nothing would remain of the machine gun after the blow. Only at the last moment did the young man figure out how to get beyond this stupid test. He put all his strength into the blow, but he deliberately hit it a little lower than he needed to. Aaron didn't even notice that his opponent was only pretending to hit the machine gun with all his might. As a result, the strength meter didn't count anything at all. Even though Sarah had so hoped for her friend's victory, Carl hoped that the machine would not be damaged too badly and that the girl would not have to pay. But suddenly a part of the machine gun fell off, demonstrating the hero's strength to everyone around. No one could have expected such a turn of events, since previously the player's strength had not exceeded the strength of the dynamometer. It was immediately clear to Aaron that he had lost this battle, but there was no direct evidence, so the guy took advantage of this and declared that this time they were on equal terms. The hero happily hushed up the story, suddenly remembering the vending machine with beautiful photographs. Sarah was immediately intrigued by the booth, as she had never done anything like it before. Although the company now consisted of 4 people instead of 2, no one was upset. The friends happily filmed themselves on camera, forgetting that they were from different worlds. Sometimes all people need to feel the warmth of those around them, even if they are not together. All this walk has become something more for the friends who were brought together by fate. Camry's heart beat happily at the sight of the photographs, each of which was now dear to her. The girl didn't want to give the card with the photo to anyone because she liked them madly. Although some of the shots were blurry, none of this upset Sarah one bit. The girl felt such great happiness that such details seemed like trifles to her. Carl was pleased to see that his suggestions made Sarah more cheerful and sweet than before. Finally, the hero took everyone to karaoke, where, for some reason, Aaron showed his mettle. For a long time, Sarah hesitated to sing in front of everyone, but soon overcame this embarrassment. Since childhood, the young aristocrat learned to sing, so she had a gentle and beautiful voice. So all her friends liked Camry's songs, although she herself felt awkward. Here too, Junga supported the girl in everything, so that the smile never left her face. Sarah enjoyed talking with her friends so much that she completely forgot about all her business. Although the hero himself did not notice it, he easily brought joy to everyone around him. Time flew by completely unnoticed, and now the whole company was saying goodbye to each other. Only at the end of the walk did the brother and sister realize that they had ruined their mistress's entire date. But Sarah enjoyed the walk so much that she didn't even think of blaming the assistants for anything. Although they interrupted her date, they all ended up having a great time together. When Camry thought about that chaotic day, her heart sank with happiness and joy. Therefore, the lady did not think about anything bad, although many things today did not go according to her plan. Miley and Erin had never noticed before that Sarah could be so kind and generous with others. The girl had a great time all day long, and it all started with ice cream. Sarah will forever remember the look on Carl's face when she came out to him in a beautiful dress. In fact, due to the huge amount of work, the girl had not had such a good rest for a long time. But as children, she and Miley and Erin often ran around the grounds of her huge estate. But soon they all grew up, and the heiress of the Camry family was faced with many responsibilities. That's why Sarah was grateful to her friends for having such a good time together. The assistants were delighted that the lady did not even think of punishing them for the failure. Next time, they wanted to make sure to help Sarah win the heart of young Carl. Until then, Miley and Erin were going to prepare even better so as not to get caught again. At the same time, one man still hadn't slept because he was working on his comics. It was the same Matt Lawrence who created so many amazing works. The man often sat until the darkest hours of the night, as inspiration came to him unexpectedly. But this time, the daughter cheerfully disturbed her father's privacy, since a friend would come to visit them tomorrow. Matt himself was glad about this meeting, since Rika told him a lot of good things about that guy. Due to his age, the head of the Lawrence family was not at all worried the next morning. But Carl was beside himself, because he saw only a great man in front of him. It was an extremely exciting event for Junga to meet such an important writer in person. The guy read his comics for many nights in a row, but had no idea that he would ever meet him. And now, before him stood the man who had invented so many amazing universes. So it was no wonder that the hero's knees were constantly shaking from great excitement. Surprisingly, Ricky's mother welcomed her friend well, as her daughter usually didn't bring anyone. The woman prepared a lot of delicious food in advance, so that the guest would definitely like everything. But Carl still felt pressure from Matt, since he had not yet had time to understand this man. It turned out that the father had heard a lot of good things from his daughter about her wonderful friend. These words could easily lead to a huge misunderstanding, which the hero did not want. But Rika came to his aid, because she was against such serious conversations at the table. Like a good father, Matt only wanted to make sure his beloved daughter was safe. And Carl understood the man's emotions, because Rika really did attract a lot of attention. The hero accidentally thought about why he met the gaze of his heated girlfriend. This situation made both friends blush right in front of the Lawrence family. But the parents did not say anything to the students, as they liked young Carl. Matt always knew that someday Rika would bring a guy home, even though she seemed like a baby to him. He devoted a lot of time to his daughter during her childhood, so as not to miss a single minute of her growing up. And until now, Rika was for her father that same little child who often got into mischief. So it was difficult for the man to accept the fact that his girl had long since grown up. Carl tried to be polite at the table, but soon Matt was the first to talk to him about comics. The guy couldn't contain his interest, as he was a fan of every story told by the head of the family. This is how the young man received not only the long-awaited autograph, but also a bunch of books as a gift. Rika then led her friend to her room, which was very different from his own. The girl arranged everything to her taste. Although her parents argued with her for a long time, Lawrence was trying to be hospitable, so she left Carl for a while to go get some tea. She only allowed him to touch the bookshelves, and the guy tried to comply with this condition. The guy didn't even think about rummaging through his girlfriend's things, because it would have been too wrong. He decided to spend time on the phone while waiting for Ricky, but then her mother looked into the room. The woman's name was Rhea, and she wanted to get to know her daughter's good friend better. Matt didn't come to Carl without a reason, because she knew that her daughter was currently in the kitchen. She took Ricky's teenage photo album with her to reveal all the secrets about her to Younger. Before the hero could refuse this offer, Rhea had already sat down next to him with photographs. It turned out that the lady herself participated in cosplay, which she soon introduced her daughter to as well. This didn't surprise Younger much, since it wasn't for nothing that Matt chose Rhea out of all the women. But Ricky's mother didn't stop there, because there were some interesting photos in the photo album. Most of all, She wanted to show off her daughter's gothic transformation, which she thought was stunning. Ria herself didn't want to show anyone this period of hers, which she had long outgrown. The girl was horrified to see that her mother had revealed all the secrets of her teenage life. Still, Younger's intuition did not fail him when it seemed to him that these photos were not worth looking at. Lawrence hadn't cosplayed in a long time, so she felt ashamed of her past dressing up. Since Mom had managed to show everything she wanted, she left the room with a mischievous smile, and both friends were left alone, feeling very awkward after what happened to their mother. Ricky didn't want to tell anyone about cosplay because she was currently ashamed of that part of herself. The girl was upset to the point of tears because her mother kept remembering that period. As usual, Carl found the right words to console his friend who was about to cry. He remembered that even before his reincarnation, the real Younger had also been involved in dressing up. Although the hero tried not to show it to anyone, now he wanted to support his friend. So the young man boldly promised Ricky to tell her something that would help her stop worrying. Lawrence was extremely curious and soon forgot about her shame. The guy spent some time searching, since the photographs were well hidden, but he was still able to prove to his friend that he himself had once been into strange cosplay. Seeing this, Ricky instantly felt better, because she was not alone in such hobbies. The hero admitted that he didn't like that period either, which is why he started training actively. The girl liked any image of a guy who reminded her so much of a good samurai. In her emotions, Ricky almost confessed her love to her friend, although she herself was unsure of her feelings. All this time, Lawrence gradually became attached to the guy, and therefore tried to be close to him. But Carl was so busy with his own problems that he didn't notice his friend's good attitude. Only now did Younger realize that communication between a boy and a girl usually developed into love. The hero didn't want Ricky to suddenly confess her love to him because it would ruin the plot. But until Lawrence realized her feelings, she was sure that she loved Carl only as a friend. This confession still confused the hero, although it was not so alarming and wrong. The boy and girl felt awkward in each other's company for a long time because of the mess. But Carl had long ago decided that he would help Ricky in everything, and his opinion did not change. The young man was incredibly grateful to the girl for the emotions she gave him in her home. Lawrence had really worked hard, so she was pleased to know that it had all been worth it. In a short time, Younger had done so much good for Ricky that she wanted to repay him in kind. Despite everything, after this moment, the friendship between friends became even stronger and more confident. They had a great time together until the evening, but Carl had to leave. Rika remembered that her friend was going on a trip with his family, so she already missed him. But Younger consoled the girl a little by saying that he would definitely bring some souvenirs with him. The guy was ready to return back at any moment if Lawrence suddenly needed help. With his physical abilities, he was able to swim across the sea, but he did not talk about it. All that mattered to Lawrence was that his friend had a good rest and returned safe and sound. At this point, they said goodbye, since the hero did not have time to pack his things for the trip. The young man was confident that their communication would continue after his return home. But Ricky's heart was restless. As she was beginning to feel something for Carl, Lawrence eagerly memorized every movement of his body and every look before parting. Moments of their friendship, which the girl treasured greatly, constantly flashed through her head. Since they met, they had experienced a lot together, and each time, they trusted each other more and more. Never before had Rika met such a kind and generous person who helped her. Even when Lawrence didn't ask for anything, Carl stayed by her side and protected her from everything. And this guy's behavior made the girl unconsciously become more and more drawn to him. While Carl had no idea that he was gradually displacing all the characters in this story, he had already completely captured Ricky's heart, although he himself had not planned anything like that. During the trip, the hero spent a lot of time alone, as he did not want to meet anyone. But adventures were not long in coming, despite the fact that the guy behaved quietly. Suddenly, a beautiful girl appeared from somewhere above and jumped straight at Carl. Taken by surprise, Younger was unable to dodge her blow, although he felt almost no pain. The hero was much more affected by the closeness to a woman's body, because he was a guy. Only at the last moment did Carl manage to catch the girl who was behaving so strangely. But the stranger didn't even think to thank the young man for his help, although she could have hurt herself. But she had so many problems at that moment in the form of the chase that the girl did not think about anything else. Since this tall guy happened to be nearby at the right time, it was to him that the girl asked for protection. Before the hero could say a word, he, too, began to run away from his pursuers along with the stranger. The guy quickly realized that this lady did not know the right way, so he led her along. Only at the last moment were they both able to hide from their pursuers in some cafe. Till the very end, the girl was afraid to come out of hiding, as she was already tired of running. Her name was Sally Crone, and she came from another country and quickly got into trouble. Only now did Sally thank the guy for his help, as the fear had almost completely subsided. But the hero didn't care about the gratitude, because he wanted to know more about the situation. For the first time in his life, he saw such a huge crowd chasing a girl, but Krone was unwilling to tell the truth, so Carl had to put pressure on her, and this also did not bring any results. Yunga no longer wanted to stay around. The guy read the girl correctly, because she was afraid of being alone again. As soon as he turned away, Sally promised to pay generously for any help he could give her. The hero's life was precisely short of money, so he immediately agreed to all the conditions. Once they made the agreement, Sally stopped hiding her true appearance. Yunga did not expect that this girl would turn out to be a famous character from the story he found himself in. Krone's parents were very famous, so she believed that they wanted to kidnap her for ransom. It was precisely this girl that the hero did not want to communicate with, but fate decreed otherwise. Carl had no option but to continue accompanying Sally. The girl specially changed her clothes so that nothing would stop her from escaping next time. Krone arrived in this country not long ago, so she would like to examine everything in detail. The hero was most surprised by the fact that Sally was almost kidnapped, but she decided to go for a walk. But Krone's idea made sense, because it was more difficult to kidnap a person from a crowded place. And now, Carl had to protect this girl until the evening, until her security arrived. Initially, it was Simons who was supposed to meet Sally, which would make her fall in love with him. But for some reason, the plot didn't go according to plan, and it was Yunga who first met the girl. At first, the guy couldn't leave Sally in trouble, because then she would be kidnapped by unknown attackers. And then she offered him so much money that Carl could not refuse a decent payment. This is how the hero found himself in a situation that, under other circumstances, he would have tried to avoid. Sally didn't choose this guy without reason, because he seemed strong enough to her, so she felt safe with Yunga, even though they didn't know each other. But the enemies discovered the girl too quickly, as her appearance was noticeable. Carl didn't immediately realize that they were quickly surrounded in order to finally catch the rich girl. The young man survived the first few blows calmly, as they didn't even hit him. But there was no point in dodging for long, since the enemies could overwhelm him with numbers. So Carl demonstrated to everyone that it was dangerous to approach him because of his enormous power. None of the opponents expected that an ordinary student would have such incredible abilities. Once again, Krone was convinced that she had made the right choice when she asked Carl for help. While there was still some time, Yunga organized the safest place for Sally. Even though it was just a telephone booth, at least the girl would definitely not be hit by a random blow. Carl understood perfectly well that he was in a difficult situation, because the enemies were well trained. Previously, the young man had only fought with amateur fighters who didn't really know any techniques, but these guys were on a completely different level, so the hero had a hard time. He was lucky only because the young man had been training hard in the gym all this time. But Carl did not let his guard down, because at any moment in the battle something could go wrong. The hero's intuition did not fail him. As one of the men attacked him at the most unexpected moment, Yunga survived the blow with fortitude. Even though it struck in a sensitive spot, Commander Brown appeared before him, surpassing all his assistants in strength. This man never lost a fight. Whether it was a matter of technique or muscle, Carl could sense from afar the powerful energy emanating from the dangerous enemy. Brown had a clear goal in mind, and he was determined to achieve it by any means necessary. If it weren't for Sally's presence, Yunga would have definitely fled this battle. But now he was obliged to protect the girl, so he could not let enemies get to her. In fact, Krone knew the dangerous commander well, so she no longer believed in Carl's victory. But the young man had no intention of retreating, because behind him was a man who needed help. But the commander quickly repelled the guy's first attacks, since he was more skilled. The man did not spare his opponent despite the fact that Carl was many times younger than him. Brown attacked with all seriousness, not wanting to fail such an important task. The commander was counting on a quick victory using techniques that only the military knew. He didn't expect the young man to resist powerful techniques despite all the pain. Carl did not think about the consequences of his actions, since his task was to protect Sally from enemies, and for her sake, he did the impossible, as he miraculously escaped from the painful grip. Brown didn't even have time to understand what exactly had happened before he hit his head hard on the floor. All the assistants were in shock, since no one had ever managed to defeat their commander before. In fact, the hero suffered a serious injury as a result of this victory, so he was incredibly angry. He was going to take out his anger on all the assistants, because of whom he could no longer go to the hall. Till the very end, Sally did not believe that her new acquaintance would be able to defeat these people. She couldn't even imagine that she would find such a strong person in another country. All the assistants had to flee, but they contacted their boss in another country. Thomas Krone was the very man whom Nilsson had once been so frightened of in his youth. And all this time, he was looking for Fiona's father, because he was an incredible rival for him. Thomas was one of the best fighters without rules until he became the head of a huge mafia group. For many years, He had not met any strong opponents who were capable of defeating him, but Thomas's winning streak ended the moment he met enro. On the day of his participation in the battles, this man reached the very top, and then for some reason disappeared without a trace. So Fiona tried to find her father for many years, but never found any traces. And then suddenly, information about Real's fight with Commander Brown appeared on the internet. At that moment, the girl did not yet know that her friend Carl was compared in strength to Ender. Meanwhile, Sally dragged Younger along with her to a very nice women's coffee shop. The girl was delighted with the design, as she always loved such girly things. The stern guy didn't like all of this, but it was as if his opinion mattered to anyone. Carl quickly came to terms with the fact that he had to visit such places in order to protect Crone. But for a long time, the hero felt uncomfortable in the cafe, which he himself would never have entered. What surprised him most was that there was almost no information about the recent fight on the internet. Younger was prepared to have his reputation completely destroyed after the battle, but it turned out that it was not in Sally's father's interests to allow rumors to spread. The girl was counting on help from the very beginning, so she didn't worry about anything. But the friends didn't have time to talk about the fight, as the waitress had already run up to them with food. At the sight of this beautiful girl, the amount of cuteness inside the hero exceeded all limits. The guy didn't expect that everyone in this cafe would be completely in line with the cosplay. But for the sake of tasty food, Younger was ready to endure a lot, since his stomach was failing him. It just turned out that in this coffee, everyone around was forced to follow the rules. The waitress demonstrated how to properly begin eating the delicious food. Carl would never have agreed to repeat these strange and unusual gestures, but since the hero agreed to accompany Sally everywhere for money, he had no other choice. Brother Carl would have gladly done everything that was necessary, but the hero had to overcome himself. Only after this did the waitress leave their table alone, because everything was fine. For a long time, Younger could not come to his senses, but at least the most difficult part had been done. This cafe also offered good entertainment for the guests, which was conducted by waitresses. So the girl suggested playing cards, since most people liked it. She liked to entertain those who came this way, since they could play for their wishes. Usually no one liked to lose because they had to wear a cute headband. Sally agreed to the deal even before they knew about the penalty for losing. And now Carl was making every effort not to wear that overly cute headband. But in the end, the waitress turned out to be so smart that the young man lost all the games. Throughout all this time, Younger never managed to come even a little closer to this difficult victory. As a result, by the end of the day, Carl was so exhausted that he didn't want to do anything else. Sally had a great rest for the first time in a long time, since she usually didn't have the opportunity. In fact, the girl hid one very important piece of information from the hero from the very beginning. Carl had no idea that he was not protecting Crone at all, but was preventing her guards from doing their job. Sally had just arrived in a foreign country and wanted to explore everything on her own. That's why she asked a stranger for help, so that nothing would happen to her. And now Crone didn't regret at all that she had made her father worry a little. If the hero knew exactly what he was getting into, he would have thought several times before doing so. But it was too late to change anything. Since Thomas had already discovered his daughter's location, the girl couldn't even imagine that her escape could lead to such serious consequences. But in reality, Crone was not interested in his daughter, but in the guy who was next to her. It was for this reason that he arrived in the country in person instead of sending guards. Sally was used to her father periodically coming for her to help the guard search, but the hero's intuition told him that this time was very different from all the previous ones. Crone understood that Thomas wasn't worried about her safety around this guy, all because the man believed that Carl was actually the missing Ender Ryle. That fighter was forever remembered by Crone because no one could ever defeat him in the ring. Of course, the hero had nothing to do with this man, but Thomas thought otherwise. He came to another country only to fight an old enemy whose face he did not know. But Carl's age told Thomas that he had made a mistake and had accidentally attacked the wrong person. Ender must be at least 40 now, and in front of Crone was an ordinary student. So Sally's father was very disappointed with the assistants who gave him the wrong tip. Younger breathed a sigh of relief when he realized that this terrible man no longer needed him. But the hero's joy was premature as Thomas remembered his successes in battle. Carl had no idea that Commander Brown was one of Crone's best subordinates. The fact that some young man had defeated that fighter made Thomas want to personally test Carl's strength. Only the young man's quick reaction saved him from the blow into which Crone had put most of his strength. The man decided to personally verify that the victory over his commander was not an accident. As a result, only the hero's backpack was damaged, which he managed to expose in time to the blow. His property was inevitably damaged, which made Charles furious because Kronos attacked unexpectedly. But the opponent's fury only further amused the man, who wanted a great fight. So the young man had to cast aside all doubts in order not to lose to this unpleasant man. What upset Carl the most was that he spent almost all the money on the comics in his backpack, and all because of Thomas, who felt the urge to fight at the very last moment. At first, the man and the boy exchanged blows with each other almost equally. The only difference was that Kron had been fighting almost since birth, and his experience was colossal. So all the hero's counterattacks only made the man laugh as he was ready for more. He did not give Junga even a minute to rest, wanting to quickly defeat the talented student. This fight was extremely difficult for Carl, as he could barely keep up with his opponent's blows, while Thomas genuinely enjoyed what was happening as he had met a worthy enemy. From Junga's fight, it was clear that he had not been trained, but he held his own almost on par. That's why Kron now wanted to take such a good fighter under his command. Once again, the hero was left in a hopeless situation, since he was not prepared to fight such a person. Only now did Carl realize that the plot genre was more like a popular action movie. Apparently, every action of Junga changed history, although he himself was not aware of it. He fought only because he wanted to protect himself or his friends from enemies. As a result, he became incredibly strong, defeating every enemy in his path. And so the plot genre stopped focusing on love, because it became less interesting. Many authors changed direction at some point to meet audience demands. So on the hero's path in the future, he will encounter many more equally strong and bloodthirsty enemies. Thomas continued to act assertively, not wanting to give Carl even a minute to think. As time went on, it became increasingly difficult for the young man to repel the enemy's attacks, and so he defended himself. But the hero stubbornly refused to become part of someone else's team, since he had his own path. Carl realized for himself that he should stay close to Simons, who is the main character in the story. Only when Wally Younger is around will all sorts of unpleasant personalities stop following him. But first, it was necessary to deal with Thomas, who was not used to deviating from his path. As soon as he heard that Carl would not join him, the man attacked with the desire to kill. The hero had just gotten used to Kran's fighting style when he suddenly changed his approach. And this time, Thomas' blows became much more violent and painful than before. The man no longer wanted to leave alive the person who could defeat him in the future. But even in such a difficult situation, Carl had the opportunity to strike back. Kran clearly didn't expect the young student to suddenly be able to hit him hard in the face. As the man's insides clenched with rage at the thought that he had lost morally to a stranger, Thomas never allowed anyone to defeat him, and only Ender succeeded. The jokes ended when Younger's blow barely hurt the man. Unlike the young man, Kran struck with the desire to kill, so he had a noticeable advantage. He personally demonstrated to the hero how to defeat all his opponents. It so happened that Thomas did not harm Carl because the boy had proven his strength, but even the man's fake blow was enough to seriously frighten the young hero. It was the first time Younger had seen such incredible technology, although he had participated in many battles. But Thomas used his family's secret trick, which usually didn't leave anyone alive. This technique was so rare that it was almost impossible to block. Even Sally was powerless to stop her father, as he never listened to her at such moments. It wasn't for nothing that Thomas terrified most of his opponents, because he fought to the death. The hero had a very hard time under the barrage of blows that practically never stopped. Kran finally decided for himself that he needed this guy to train him as his soldier. The fact that the young man was able to block heavy blows already spoke volumes. At the very beginning of his rebirth, the hero would have agreed to the offer, but now he has friends, and for their sake, Carl was ready to fight to the end to defend his right to a free life. The old man greatly underestimated the hero's determination when he thought that he would be afraid of him. As a result, the man and the boy clashed fists again, and Carl gradually began to give in. Younger's strength was not yet enough to defeat the now strong Kran, but the hero still tried his best, just to defend his desires and rules. Thomas didn't even think of feeling even a little sorry for his opponent, despite the age difference. He hit his heart as always, because he didn't joke when he wanted to subdue the young man. What the man didn't expect was that the boy would continue to resist. No matter how many times Kran hit Carl with his heavy fists, the hero still held on until the very end. Thomas' blows seemed to grow stronger with every minute they spent fighting. As a result, the hero was finally convinced that the strongest person stood before him. Sally knew from the very beginning that her father was practically invincible in battle. The girl still couldn't stand it and tried to protect her friend, because she was grateful to him. But at that moment, the man didn't even care about his daughter, since she was in the way. Carl was horrified that his father treated Sally, who was his own, so mercilessly. If Thomas had behaved less cruelly, he would hardly have been able to achieve such a high status. So Kran had no doubt that he was right, even though his actions looked scary. By this point, the hero was so exhausted that he was no longer able to fight. And at exactly that moment, a change occurred that would radically change the outcome of the battle. Daggers appeared from somewhere, their sharpness instantly forcing Thomas to step back. The movements of the unknown man were so fast that it was difficult to resist him. All this time, Fiona was looking for a man who reminded people on the internet of her missing father, and as a result, she bumped into Carl and immediately realized that it was he who had been compared to Ender. Ryle remembered that her dad had fought with this very man before he disappeared. The girl's appearance greatly raised the guy's morale, which had dropped to almost zero. For Kronos, having one more person did not change the balance of power because he considered himself stronger. But Fiona didn't come to the rescue empty-handed. Otherwise, there would have been no point. She brought with her their family's secret medicine, which was capable of unlocking potential. Her father had previously taken it because the pills were only good for male energy. At the sight of the unknown medicine, Kran became a little tense as he had heard something about pills. Fiona took it upon herself to distract Thomas until Carl was ready to fight. Although the hero did not like taking unknown medications, he had no other choice. As soon as he took the medicine, the young man immediately felt a little different. His whole body felt like it was on fire, but the feeling was surprisingly pleasant and gave him strength. Carl felt as if he had awakened from a long and drawn-out sleep into complete inactivity. Now, even Thomas did not seem strong to the hero since power overwhelmed him. The guy was ready to fight Kran with the new strength he received after taking these pills. Fiona saw that Younger was getting the maximum effect from the pills, but it was temporary. The girl did not know exactly how long Carl's new powers, which he had received artificially, would last. We could only hope that during this time, the guy would manage to defeat Thomas. As soon as the hero felt new strength, he was ready to protect his friends to the last. In Carl's eyes, Kran was a real scumbag for not taking care of his only daughter. But all of Younger's words only made the mafia boss laugh, as he always thought only of himself. For Thomas, kindness and care did not exist because only force subjugated everyone around him. He did not know what happened to the girls after their epic battle. For this reason, the hero had even more motivation to defeat the enemy. Kran had been giving off a powerful aura from the start, but now it was even stronger. Finally, the man was ready to fight seriously, as Carl's changes alarmed him. He was the first to strike a few tentative blows, which surpassed all the others in speed. But this time, everything was different, as the pills improved not only the hero's strength, but also his reaction time. The guy deliberately let the man get closer to him in order to find a chance for a counterattack. Kronos struck as if he wanted to kill his opponent and stopped at nothing along the way. But soon, the balance of power was on the side of Younger, who had been waiting patiently all this time. Although the young man's attacks were not as powerful, they quickly confused the enemy. Carl noticeably increased his tenacity because he couldn't afford to lose for the girls. So now Thomas had to dodge blows that could take his life. The man couldn't believe that just a few pills had changed the student so much. He still considered himself the strongest since, except for Ender, he had never lost to anyone in his life. And this pride did not allow Thomas to retreat even in the face of incredible danger. For some time now, Kran had been preparing a secret technique that was capable of tearing muscles, but he didn't take into account that the hero's muscles were practically made of stone, because he trained a lot. So the guy didn't care about Thomas' attempts to hurt him in any way. As a result, it was the man who was injured in the attack that was directed at Younger. The pills produced such good results that the guy quickly demonstrated all his capabilities. No one expected that for the first time in many years, Thomas would be defeated by a student. This circumstance dealt a severe blow to the pride of Kronos, who considered himself invincible. He saw Carl's enormous potential, but he didn't believe the guy was capable of winning right now. All of Thomas' hopes for his strength were ultimately dashed by the harsh reality. Students now developed much faster than many adults around their age, and proof of this was Younger's stunning victory, even with pills. Until now, the hero felt a huge surge of strength inside, and therefore was ready to fight further. But his opponent no longer moved, as fatigue had finally taken its toll. Fiona was most surprised by Carl's victory, although she had hoped for it. But in the end, the guy exceeded all her expectations, as he was practically unharmed in the battle. Sally was most upset because her father had harmed her new acquaintance so much. The girl had no doubt that Younger was only trying to look strong and calm. Kronos felt responsible for Thomas, since it was because of her that he had come here. As the girls expected, Carl soon found it difficult to stand on his feet because he ran out of pills. A great deal of fatigue fell upon the young man, but otherwise, he was fine. Since everything ended well, Sally had to run away before the guards caught her. The girl decided to do everything possible to ensure that no one found out about this fight. A few days later, the holidays ended, and Carl returned to the university with anxiety in his heart. But he didn't hear a single rumor that a real mafia boss was fighting somewhere. All this did not give Carl any peace, as his intuition continued to warn him of danger. And then the teacher announced that a new exchange student was joining the boys. Yoonga immediately realized that this was exactly what his body had been warning him about all day. It turned out that Sally didn't go anywhere, but decided to stay in the country and study. What the hero was most afraid of was that the girl would behave as strangely as she had when they met, and Carl's fears were soon justified, as Sally confidently confessed her love to him. But all this time, Yoonga was desperately trying to blend in among the characters, but he was hindered. Once again, the hero was pulled out of the shadows, which made the young man feel extremely awkward. All this attention should have been directed at Simons, but somewhere along the line, something went wrong. And now, Crone planned to fight for the heart of the man who had saved her not long ago. Sally's appearance quickly attracted the attention of all the students who loved beauties. The more the girl talked about her love for Carl, the more the hero wanted to run away. Crone was not embarrassed to honestly admit her feelings, since she had already decided everything for herself. As if the young man didn't have enough problems with the other characters, Sally was still around. Rika reacted particularly sharply to her friend's possible affair, since he kept silent about it. Whatever Yoonga said to his friend now, it all looked like stupid and useless excuses. The hero himself understood how pathetic he was acting when he tried to come up with an excuse for himself. Until now, he couldn't understand why Sally never paid attention to Simons. He tried to have little influence on the plot, but some of his actions constantly changed the future. That's why Carl found himself in a situation where he was surrounded by beautiful girls. This time, Tori also joined him, having forgotten her feelings for Wally forever. Now, Nielsen turned her attention to Yoonga, who seemed to her stronger and more handsome than the others. Sally wasn't kidding when she said she intended to always be by Carl's side. As soon as she noticed Tori approaching, the girl immediately got involved in the argument. But Nielsen was also the daughter of a mafia boss, so she wasn't used to giving in to anyone. Before the hero could even blink, both girls began to pull him towards themselves. Tori didn't want to give her friend to some stranger, even though she was a very beautiful girl. In desperation, Nielsen came up with the idea that Carl had been dating the smart and sweet Lawrence all this time. But this was so far from the truth that a conflict began between the girls again. Carl had no idea how the plot could possibly have happened.